And I thought about my life, and I thought about how I should be sitting there. And I say that every week when someone comes up and saying, I should be where they are sitting and confess what they're confessing. And as I was preparing this lesson, I was thinking to myself, I need to be sitting here even before the sermon. Because as I was preparing this lesson, I was truly convicted. Because the thing that I think about with this lesson is one that talks about risk-taking. And I often think as Christians, we have to be the most bold people in the world. We need to be risk-takers of faith. And I look at my life and I think so much of how I've been a coward. I've been a coward in not saying the things that God told me to say. I've been a coward in not doing the things that God has called me to do. I've been a coward and just made excuses for the way that I've chosen to live my life at times. And I just thought about this. Why am I so scared? Why am I so afraid? Why am I so not willing to do the things God has called me to do? I think about Moses Lake and I think about all the people who need Jesus Christ. And I think to myself, why am I being afraid of them? Why am I not sharing with them the gospel of Jesus Christ? I mean, it seems like when I think about my cowardice in regards to my faith, sometimes I'm afraid of elderly people. Sometimes I'm afraid of teenagers. Sometimes I'm afraid of those taller than me. Sometimes I'm afraid of those better looking than me. All two of them. Okay. But that is a fact, though. We really do come up with excuses for why we're afraid. It's like, why are we so afraid? Am I afraid that an elderly person's going to cane me? Am I afraid that I'm going to be outwitted by a teenager who knows everything? No. But we make all these excuses. And the verse that really convicts my heart is Revelation chapter 21:8. And it says this, "But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and the liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur." This is the second death. I mean, look at that list, for instance. When we look at that list, we'd say those people deserve hell. They're idolaters, they're adulterers, they're murderers, they practice magic arts. But do you notice how the first one listed are the cowardly? I mean, why is that there? I mean, we often think of the famous passage in Matthew chapter 10, verse 32 and 33, where Jesus is sending off his disciples on a short-term commission. And he's telling them in this passage, if you confess me before men, I will confess you before the Father. But if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father. And in Matthew chapter 10, as he's teaching that, he's sending out his disciples in that passage saying, go and preach the kingdom that it's near. Go and tell the people about Jesus and depend on him in faith. Don't take these extra articles of clothing and this extra money with you. You go and depend on faith. You go take risk. You go and preach the word. And we think about that passage and we think about how that is the kind of faith that we should be having. I mean, Christianity is not a religion for cowards. Because cowards will not live by faith. Cowards will not preach the kingdom. Cowards will not share the gospel with people who they know need the gospel. Cowards will not live righteously in an ungodly world. And so, in understanding this, we understand why the cowardly would not be saved, because they are not living by faith. And we know that a faith that God deems as acceptable is one that is living in action, one that's living in faithfulness, one that is living in obedience. It's that one that says, I will fear God more than I fear mankind, and I will do all the things that God has called me to do. If he tells me to preach, I will preach. If he tells me to shine my light, I will shine my light. We know that God is looking for those who will fulfill his will, regardless of the cost that that person may have to sacrifice. You see, one of the main common principles we learn at an early age is the concept of risk and reward, right? You learn that principle when you're young in economics, and it's the understanding that greater the risk, greater the reward. But also, greater the risk, greater the chance that you'll lose what you've got. And so in this regard, sometimes we get this mentality that says, I'm afraid to lose what I have. And because of this, we tend to live these comfortable, apathetic, safe lives. We are not willing to step out on faith. We're not willing to say, I don't know what God has planned for me in every specific scenario, but I know that God has told me to do these things, and so I should go out and do it. That's faith. But oftentimes, we live with safety and comfort and more predictability. I mean, why do we like having luxurious church buildings? Because it's safe and comfortable for us. Why is it that we proclaim Jesus Christ more on Sundays than we do any other day of the week? It's because it's safe. It's comfortable. But faith is that aspect that says, you know what? I want you to go out and do what I've called you to do. I want you to sacrifice. I want you to suffer. I want you to take risks, because those are the ones who demonstrate that they love Jesus Christ more than anything else in this world. That if they have to suffer, so be it. If they have to sacrifice, so be it. They are willing to go and do what God has called them to do out in faith. But I think about this and it's asked, sometimes we think about how we count the cost. And we do count the cost. Sometimes we understand that some may lose their family or friends if they come to Christ. Some know that they may lose their possessions. Some people know that they're going to lose their energy and their time. Sometimes you're going to be burned. But the thing is, those things aren't going to happen. Jesus even made that known. You will be persecuted. You will lose possessions. You will give up time. You will exert energy. And sometimes people will deny the gospel. But regardless of all those things, you have faith. You be a risk taker. I mean, we look at people who take risks and we admire them. Who are the people in this world that make a difference? They're the risk takers. I mean, I talk with a lot of people in their older age, and they keep saying, you know what, if I was younger, I would have taken greater risks. I would have taken those opportunities that God had given me. I would have done these things differently. But because they weren't willing to walk by faith and take those risks, they live with a life of regret. But the people who make a difference are the ones who really are those who are saying, regardless of all the costs, I'm going to take risks for God. I'm going to make my faith mean something. Even though it's hard and difficult, I know that those hard and difficult things are the things that change the world. I mean, if changing the world was easy, everyone would be doing it. But it's those that say, I know that there's a challenge here, but I won't see it as a challenge. I won't see it as a consequence. I will see it as an opportunity to bring glory to God. And that is what people of faith do. I mean, we look in the Bible. Aren't the people that we commend the ones who took risks in the Bible? Aren't they the ones of great faith? The ones that says, regardless of the cost, I will go and do what God has called me to do. I mean, I think about people in the Old Testament. I think about people like Abraham and David and Job. They were ones who were willing to sacrifice. They took risks for the Lord. They're the ones who we admire. And I think about Paul. I think about Paul in Romans chapter 1. I don't like reading Romans chapter 1 sometimes, because we read that famous passage about how Paul says he's unashamed of the gospel. Do we ever get ashamed of the gospel? I mean, sometimes I get ashamed of the gospel. Sometimes I'll be at a coffee place and I'll see someone and I'm like, I need to go and tell that person about Jesus. And so I'll be walking around kind of nervous, keep looking at them, twiddle with my fingers and everything like that. And that person thinking I'm creepy, but the whole time I'm thinking, I'm being ashamed. I'm being ashamed. I'm here twiddling my fingers looking like a creeper when I should be bold and say, do you know about Jesus Christ? But I cower. I'm not like Paul sometimes. And because of the consequence of my fear and my unwillingness to step out of faith, people are not going to hear about Jesus Christ. Romans chapter 10 asks the question, how are people going to know about Jesus? How are people going to know about the gospel unless someone tells them? Unless someone preaches it? And the people that God has called to do that is me and you. You see, one of the things that we have to understand is, in faith makes a difference. It's that opportunity that God has given us. The world tries to make